Now let me, Shilpa, if I could ask you to strike the opening bars. You know, when the Museum of Art and Photography first made an appearance in its digital avatar, then it took on to its physical spaces. While it was a museum of art and photography, if I know my earlier conversations with you all, the focus was on education and outreach. And education was a real vital core in the blueprint and in the planning. Just etch us the picture or the canvas as to what that journey of arts education has been with a space which is essentially a museum.
Okay. Hello? Yeah. Thanks, Sadhana. I think with MAP, as you were saying, education and outreach was always considered something that would be key to the museum right from a decade ago when it was being planned. The idea being, I think, that a lot of MAP's mission, the vision of the museum was always around building access to the arts, but also transforming perceptions of the arts and the museum that are commonly held. And to kind of think about building audiences who often think of museums as spaces that are dry and unexciting. And in the larger context of things, because this is also very specifically on education, realizing that our education system and the way it looks at art and the kind of emphasis or lack thereof it places upon it, makes it incumbent for young people, and in particular then students, children, to be, to be kind of proactive about ensuring that education is part of that process from how the museum approaches things. So even prior to, so MAP in itself, for those of you who don't know, has had a little bit of a journey. We currently, we opened last year in February, so we're about a year and a half old as far as our physical space is concerned. But we also kind of had a digital opening in 2020. And way prior to that, actually, is when our work with schools began. So around 8 years ago, we just sort of started doing these engagements within our office spaces. And a lot of what we were doing was experimental in that sense, because we were building and designing engagements with museum objects in a form or fashion that you didn't quite see in, say, the government museum or the NGMA at the time. And what we wanted to kind of do was not look at arts education as simply being something that is around expression or giving kids the ability to create and through that a voice, but also something where looking and thinking with the arts opens up possibilities of learning that aren't contained only within the arts. And that was always sort of the emphasis with which we began. And we were meant to open the physical building in 2020, but of course, much changed, the pandemic hit. And MAP also kind of had to pivot on its plans. And then we decided to kind of work towards a digital opening. Also at the time thinking of like, what could that really mean? And not fully quite comprehending the possibilities, but jumping into it feet first. And I think a lot of our programming, including the work we were doing with schools, all went online as well. There was, of course, a global appetite for engagement with content, and in particular, arts-based content at the time. People, I think, were interested not just from the perspective of the arts becoming a space for, comfort or refuge, but also from a skill kind of opportunity. Like people were learning new languages. I think they began with the possibilities of the internet to also, learn to play instruments and things like that. So there was a lot of scope in it. And I think the only sort of flip side to that from our perspective of doing work with schools was that it also very clearly brought to the forefront the digital divide. So on the one hand, we were now able to reach schools across the country, but there were NGOs and so on that we were working with earlier that we could no longer quite connect to in that period. And then, of course, I think with the opening of the museum, what has been very exciting has to be sort of the gratification of being able to get people back. And this sort of journey, as you said, that we have had, I think has also been a little bit of a validation story, because I think at the very start, we were often on the back foot trying to explain to educational institutions the value of their learners engaging with us. And I think over the course of this journey, and in particular now at the museum, it's also exciting to see that this value is something that they are beginning to ascribe to the museum as a space of learning for themselves.
Fantastic. Show of hands, how many of you all have visited MAP here? Wow. That's a fantastic endorsement.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a fantastic endorsement. Actually, it's true what you said about these learners, the learners ascribing value, because if you go into MAP and you see, if I remember when I think Kamini had invited me, and there was this student, a group of students, about 50 of them, and one of them said, I want to know everything about Devi. And there was this young volunteer who clicked this icon, and every artist who had done some kind of painting on Devi was there for them to see. So cheers. Cheers to you all, and cheers to that educational journey. Shifting gears to you, Vikram, you've had a very unusual journey, right? Banking, New York, festivals, dark side, light side. No, that's what happens when we have a panel. When we are the concluding panel, all the dark secrets are out. Vikram, now you helm an institute which has a sensitivity to the arts, has a sensitivity to discussions around creative sector, which is the reason why we are all here. Give us a sense of your milestones, destinations, some kind of a roadmap that you followed or not.
I was going to say, I'm going to tell you when I find out. But, it's nice that you speak about BIC with such nuance. I mean, most people would think, to paraphrase Ravi, we're like a college festival on steroids. So that's what Ravi kind of seems to say. No, I think as you work in an arts institution and day in, day out, you have to engage with it. So much of your own childhood comes back. You're able to reflect on certain experiences you had as a child or as a young person engaging with the arts, and you didn't quite even know what that meant. Like, for example, going to the Metropolitan Museum for the first time, or going to these forced school trips to the Prince of Wales Museum, which wasn't as good as it is today. But these all stay with you in some shape or form, and they come back. And I think that's sort of what the journey is, right? Like, I think I think in an earlier panel we were talking about it. The arts teach you to live with uncertainty. You can actually live with that uncertainty in your life, in your being, and almost welcome it, almost want it. And I think that's sort of what happens. I think that's what, if you say, you piece your life together, either I know exactly what I'm doing in my life or I have absolutely no clue. Those are your two outcomes, right? And so I think one learns to take it one day at a time. Whatever comes your way, you go on and really, really follow your gut. I think that's where I would say my sort of journey adds up.
Follow your gut. I'm going to wear my BIC insider hat and give you a little information. As a director, Vikram has brought in two valuable students of his, not necessarily from the arts. So I think they should have come on Asad's panel. Both of them have studied another discipline, but they are at the arts. One of them is Naz, who's been helming this conference with us. A big round of applause to Naz. And Puneet, who's not here. So, it sort of shows a line. It shows a line of a path chosen. So this was a surprise. I didn't put it in my preamble to you.
More for Naz.
Yeah. So this is a modern day take on the Guru Shishya Parampara. Puneeta, you shared with us your slides, but you live in a world which is absolutely grossly unequal, screaming indignities. Yet, through arts intervention, yet through arts education, you're trying to make it right. So you gave us a brief overview of through your slides. Just go a little deeper and share with us what has your course in expressive arts been? How have you used that? Because I think the word you use is you're dealing with children not in a classroom kind of a situation or a curriculum place, but it's really open-ended and with children who are at conflict with law.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Absolutely. So thank you. So the children that I deal with, well, let me just come to the exact specifics and not talk the larger canvas. They're young adults, young boys, from 16 to 22, 23. Because if you're even one day younger than 18 and you've committed a crime, you come under they used to be called juveniles earlier, but now they're children in conflict with law. That's the legal term. So these young boys, actually, I would say they live in a no man's land, invisible to society, considered criminals by the neighborhood, and the future stretches before them. It's bleak, it's dark. And honestly, I was actually I was questioned by a Supreme Court judge. We were meeting at a panel, the police was releasing a youth helpline. And he turned to me and he asked me after the panel was over that, would I be interested in working with a group of young people who were invisible? And I was surprised because, with Sanjay and me, we worked a lot with street children. And I know people are empathetic to street kids. So then he introduced me to, this term children in conflict with law. And he said, I said, look, I don't have any special skill set to work, because I was doing a lot of work in schools and with NGOs. He gave me access to what is called an observation home, which is actually a euphemism for a children's jail. So the slides that we showed, there wasn't for sensationalism, they're actual visuals, because these are high walls, barbed wire, guards, cells, all of that. And after the 2012 Nirbhaya incident, the whole perception towards them has actually hardened. And anyway, the entire thing of saying that juvenile was the most barbaric was actually a sensational report. He wasn't. But anyway, I don't want to go there. What that did was that it brought an amendment to the Juvenile Justice Act that if this happened in 2020 and 2021, it was passed, that if a magistrate thought that that young man who committed the crime was in his senses, it was a conscious act, it was a heinous crime in his perception of what heinous meant, he would then be tried as an adult. And all the rights that would be accorded to a child would not be given to him. So those are 70% of the young men I deal with, actually. They're in this particular home, which is for the convicted boys, for the guys under heinous crime. And I have to say that once I went to meet them, I really didn't find them any different from the other young people I worked with, And I was sharing with you that when I walked away and those doors closed behind me, the gates, that's when I really understood what freedom meant, And it was a pang, because I was walking away and I could choose wherever I wanted to go, but they were all just waving to me, looking so sad, So it was, and then it was like I said, I have to come and be able to engage with them. And my background is theater. And so that was the thing that I could offer to them. Expressive arts was something I did in Chennai. So this was 2008. Carried on working with the homes. Then 2014, I was introduced to expressive arts, which is an intermodality approach, drama, theater, visual art, all of that. And that actually sort of, it opened up, it sort of made me understand the power of arts, the power of creation. Because theater is about role-playing and you can express, but the boys are inhibited. They need a lot of coaxing. But you give, again, another thing, you give them pencils, crayons, paints, and it's like, is this for me? And they have never ever worked with these materials earlier. It's really sad. And so then to be able to get them to connect with their feelings, a lot of us, our whole thing is about emotional intelligence, about awareness. They didn't like that initially. Ma'am, why are you taking us back to that pain and those memories we want to forget? But our whole thing is that you have to first become aware, acknowledge, and find other ways to release it. Not through destructive, mujhe badla lena hai.
And probably closure.
Probably, but it's
Probably.
a long...
That's a long way off.
Yes. And so, the journey has been, I've been doing this for almost 15 years. And a lot of people ask me, so what's your impact? What are the numbers? And I'm saying, do you understand the circumstances within which we are operating? There were some NCRB stats of 2012 or 2013 that said about 42% of the boys came from families with an annual income of 25,000 rupees. Another 25% annual income between 25,000 and 50,000 annual income. So, it's poverty, it's alcoholism in the family, dysfunctional families. The education system is, because of the other amendment that you will not fail a child till they're in class 9. So it's unimaginative classrooms, they drop out. So, and I'm listening to you all with such envy about access to the arts, opportunities to engage with the finer points in life. They don't have that, And yet, the little bit that we have been doing, what we are trying to do is to get them to have a sense of belief in themselves. To even get a sense of self. Sorry, I should rewind. I am. मैं भी कुछ हूँ. मैं इंसान हूँ. And when we did a play on that, they asked me, ma'am, why are you saying मैं इंसान हूँ? Am I an animal? And I'm saying, no. But इंसानियत, what does it mean? It doesn't mean that I just have a body and, I have my 5 senses. So, those little things about, and then we talk about the language of love, and I can carry on. I know you need to go to Janaka, but...
No, I guess what you're doing, we'll come back to you in in round 2, but I guess what you're doing is, if the drop takes care of itself, the ocean will be fine. We all live in times where we are all trained on the big picture, measurable, big data. I mean, people like in the arts, we really don't, we are handicapped. And of course, I'm not saying the handicap in a glorious way, but I guess at some times, if the drop takes care of itself, the ocean will be fine at some point.
I would just say that we are planting seeds.
Yeah. Hold the thought, I'll come back to you. So Janaka, you did, sort of give us a picture of the work British Council did. I'd just like to drive in 2 points, having read all your reports and have been working closely with Paramita, you, all of you all. There is something that you all have in your focus, that is inclusivity and democratization. Now, these are very big words, but there are paths to take that forward. So could you just sort of run us through the processes you follow in terms of, particularly with reference to your work that you're doing in Karnataka?
Thanks, Sadhana. I think for us, not just the arts, right? Because we work a lot with the state, with this state specifically on education. On higher education, we have done extremely well. And part of it is also, I don't think we want to call it arts integration, but because the policy at the national level does actually recommend for integration of the arts into mainstream
holistic
curriculum. But it's easier said than done. Your setting is absolutely, it's unimaginable for people like us because we don't work in settings like that. But we work in settings like government schools, not even non-governmental bodies, but mostly government schools, where I think there has been a lot of improvement. It's not so dark after all. So I know that, sometimes we feel that the governments are not doing enough, but I can say that after having worked very closely with governments, I think there's political will and intent. Budget sometimes can be an issue. But for us, I feel the work that we've done with this particular state has been incredibly, we've learned so much from the state as well. So for example, in November, 25, the number can be very small, but 25 students from government colleges in Karnataka are going to go on a 2-week immersion program to the UK. These are children who've never perhaps been on a plane, who've never traveled anywhere, let alone abroad. They're going to the University of East London, and the themes that they have chosen, the universities have chosen, they're all from government colleges and universities, are around sustainable development goals, around entrepreneurship, around big data, around learning business skills and stuff like that. So for us, I feel that, and again, I think out of the 25, I think there's a 50-50, almost like 50% women and 50%, girls and boys. In the arts in Karnataka, for us it's more, our arts work is more B2B, not really B2G, not with government. But there, I think Bangalore is very, very lucky to have institutions like MAP, like IME, like the Science Gallery, and many others. In fact, we collaborated, Janvi alluded to that very briefly, we collaborated with the Vishweshwaraya Museum. This is actually a joint project between the National Science Museum Group in the Science Museum Group in London and the National Council of Science Museums, which is headquartered in Kolkata but have branches everywhere. So we did collaborate with the Vishweshwaraya Technological Museum. We brought down an exhibition. If you've not seen it, it's still on. Please go take a look. It's called Vaccines Injecting Hope. It was commissioned during COVID. It was commissioned because of the 75th anniversary of India's independence. It's a Delhi-based artist and a UK-based artist who put the work together. And the interesting thing, the big connection to Karnataka that Janvi spoke about is, so the artist, the UK artist, took the painting that was done by an Irish painter long back, many, many years ago, of the 3 Mysore Maharanis, the princesses of Mysore, where she actually lifts her, in those days it was unheard of a royal family member to lift their arm and show the vaccination mark, to be able to encourage the public to come and take the smallpox vaccine. So for us, that project is really sitting at the intersection of science, art, as well as collaboration. The one thing that I think will make a big difference to whatever everybody before us has spoken and what we are speaking is the power of collaboration. We sometimes underestimate the power of collaboration. I'm not saying, collaborate with the UK. With the UK is great, but even amongst ourselves. Museums could collaborate among themselves. Organizations can do that pretty much independently. Yes, funding always is a challenge, but I think if you want to find a way, there are ways. So one of the things that I will take back from this event is I've promised Priyanka that I will visit NGMA. And because we do a lot of stuff in Bangalore, sometimes we do it in a hotel space. We did one event at the Science Gallery, which was amazing. That was like a big ticket King's birthday party event. But so I'm sure we can collaborate like that. In terms of BIC, yeah, BIC.
Okay, we'll come back to education.
BIC, yeah. But in terms of inclusion,
This is conversation for roundtable.
Just to pull it back to your inclusion conversation, most of our projects, so we work to 15 global programs, 3 of which speak to the arts. And the 3 programs that speak to the arts are Culture Connects, where I think where artists or artisans or artistic communities from here are able to go to the UK and vice versa. And it's a kind of smallish exchange program, not large budgets, but the outcomes from that are phenomenal because it creates those long-term connections between people here and people there, which actually forms that living bridge. That is one. The other is Culture Response to Global Challenges, which is again around climate, around crafts. So for example, we did this amazing project called Crafting Futures, where 80% of the beneficiaries and end users were women. So it was really not a gender-focused project, but by virtue of the project, we had a lot of women coming and working on that project. And now we have a crafting toolkit, which is accessible to everyone. So most of our materials are free of cost. Not most, all of our materials are free of cost. It's available on our website. The last one and the big one is Creative Economy, which is why we are here. In Creative Economy, if you see, and if you read some of our reports, you'll see that during COVID, most of the people who got affected were women artists. Men found a way to do something, but women participation decreased a lot during COVID because they had caregiving responsibilities, they had other things to do, plus deal with home situations, etc. So one of the things that the UK and India did well together was to look at, it's called the Creative Cultural Hubs, I think, in the UK. And this is something that we presented to as part of the UKRI, which is UK Research and Innovation. As part of that dialogue, we presented it during the G20 as well. And I think the creative clusters in the UK are a really good example for states like Karnataka to learn from and also to contribute to. Because if you look at the creative clusters in the UK, like Sanjoy mentioned, the GDP contribution, not just that. So the cluster in Manchester focuses on one particular, strength. The clusters in London are completely different. So I feel with India's sort of, diversity and also there's a lot of hyper-local context in India, which, in Karnataka, for instance, somebody spoke about the Chennapatna
In the
toys,
previous.
etc. So I feel there is huge scope and opportunity if only we could channelize our energies. I mean, having these conversations are great, but I feel as a follow-through of this, I mean, the report that you did from the Mumbai and Kochi one, that's great, but I feel that if we follow through with some concrete actions at the end of each of these discussions, it could be one small step, but I think that will sort of take us further in a big way. And I feel Karnataka is well poised to take that next big step in terms of pooling together its resources, because you've got such a vibrant public community and also socially conscious arts community, which I've not seen in many other parts of the country.
I
So
think
feel
Chennai and
really-
Kolkata would also. Chennai and
Chennai
Kolkata.
is slightly different because
Yeah.
I feel you have these big arts organizations. Chennai has
Some
pockets
groundbreaking
of-
work is being done there.
Yeah, of course, yes, it does.
Okay.
Have.
So
But yeah, Kolkata as well. Yeah.
thank you all for that foundational score. I think it was deep. Moving forward, let me just circle back to you, Vikram. Given your role helming an organization, and more importantly, your role in education within the Delhi schools, there was a clear mandate, and what you all have achieved at grassroots levels. Give us 2 or 3 suggestions that you think would be valuable for a policy initiative to nurture creative leaders, so that, that George Land study, it's not the descent of imagination continuously. You could probably break it up in whatever way you want.
I'm trying to avoid the problem of remembering this answer at the next question, so I'm just thinking it through right now. No, I think, the real challenge is our subjects in schools. If you look at how subjects are taught in schools, they're more around, obviously geared to the test. That's one big part of it. But largely, it's a selective process. And just think of it from a teacher's perspective. And particularly when you get into the arts or physical education, you're looking, let me find the 5 or 10 children who are good at this, so I feel validated. When I come into the classroom, I feel a sense of purpose being there. All the other 20 or 30 are actually made to feel like losers if you are not doing good stuff, right? So the real work is, I think you asked for 2 or 3 points. I think if I said 3 things, one is capacity building of teachers. We had a teacher in our school where Nazneen also studied, who had a curriculum from grade 1 to grade 10, and you wouldn't believe it, in grade 1 and 2, he would take paper clips, and he would tell kids, take a piece of paper, A4, he'd give everyone that, and he says, you have to fill this A4 paper with this paper clip shape, but no 2 can be the same. And you have to just keep doing it children would spend hours doing it, and anyone could do it, and each pattern came out something very interesting. And he scaffolded that all the way till grade 10, where every student had some sense of aesthetic. Right? The second thing I think is almost like an arts appreciation course. Like, you don't need to learn art as a skill, but as something that you engage with. So there's a vocabulary, there's an experience, all of these things, and it's collective. So you can kind of speak to each other about it and take that forward. And it's something I said about even in Delhi when I spoke. If you do that often enough, children then, when they become adults, it creates a part of them which is their own. No one can touch that part. right? Like if you have a sense of relation to the world through art, it becomes your own. No one can touch it. And then the third thing I would say is, which we were able to do in Delhi with incredible success, is once students come to high school, there must be specialized schools for art, where students who really feel this is my way are rewarded for it, and they're almost recognized amongst the others. Bhai, ye bhi topper hai. You know, being an exceptional dancer or an exceptional artist, and you're getting almost academic credit for it, is the way to solve it if you wanted to solve it from a long-term systemic point of view. I would say these three things.
That was great. Thank you for that. Let's segue from what Vikram has just said to you, Puneeta. You know, you don't have any just let me put a caveat out. The reason of your inclusion in this panel was that we have to have this dialogue, and we have to have this dialogue within the mainstream. So I understand where you're coming from, but that was an idea that we have to have, because these are children of society. They're going to be equal partners. They're going to be stakeholders in society. What would you, in your work, what is the help that you seek from the government, you seek from educators, you seek from the creative economy? What would you seek? Probably they may be leaders, but even if they were not leaders, you know, it's a line I'll use in Hindi, ख्वाबों में किफ़ायती नहीं करनी चाहिए. That is, you know, in dreams, we shouldn't be miserly. So even a student, given the background that you all come from, where they've come, where the children that you're dealing with come from,
Right.
I mean, they have aspirational to be leaders.
Absolutely.
So what would you like to be in terms of a curriculum design, in terms of learning pathways? What would the learning pathway system be? Just give us your thoughts on that.
Yeah, thank you. So, it's interesting when you spoke about they aspire to be leaders. Today, they aspire to be Lawrence Bishnoi. Okay? Because that's what they have access to, and that's what it finally comes down to power. And power is related to fear. They've seen that in their neighborhood. The boy told me, he said, ma'am, good boy. I mean, in fact, he's finished his class 12. He has a lot going for him. And as of today, in fact, he has been enrolled in the it's actually the Open University. He's starting a business management course today. But he told me, he said, you know, I looked around and I saw that the good people were constantly being put down by the bad people. The bad people had the power because people were afraid of them. So we're trying to change that mindset, you know. And for me, it's actually, the arts it's creating first a safe space where they can actually start expressing their insecurities, their vulnerabilities, right? And their dreams and aspirations. And then in that process, so what do I want, Sadhana? I want actually, you know, the government has, the Juvenile Justice Act has a rehabilitation and reintegration program in the act. But they are looking at functional stuff. They give them food, clothing, shelter, you know, but nothing really to stimulate them. At one point, I thought that, you know, the government in terms of policy should put in arts, arts education or exposure to arts into that, right? And then I thought again and I said, I don't really want them to hire teachers and, you know, because what the biggest issue within the home is the staff sensitization. It's not there. You know, they have to pass an exam, and honestly, being chosen in the Department of Women and Child Development is almost like a punishment posting. Because what they say, wahan to kuch paisa nahi milta. So they are not sensitized to children. They are supposed to care for the kids. But almost every week they tell me, ma'am, you're wasting your time. Why are you coming here? Inse kuch nahi hoga. So if the caregiver does not believe that that child can reform, can heal, you know, so you're fighting against that. What I would want actually is a recognition of the power of arts, that the government opens it up and invites artists to come in and work with the children, because you have to work from the heart. It cannot be a job that you're doing, you know. a 9-to-5 job because, and again, I mean, talking about the staff, it's one of the most difficult environments to work in. You know, because there's no acknowledgement of what you're doing. You're constantly, you're fighting against, and okay, they get paid once in 4 months. So, they're battling their own issues. They're envious that we have brought a national level basketball coach for the kids. They tell us, ma'am, hamare bachcho ko ye nahi milta. It's that. So arts absolutely, but have grants, invite artists. We try and do that as much as we can because I become a professional beggar. I'm constantly, but the idea is to also expose them to as much of the best, and then also younger people who are into dance, theatre, puppetry, working with clay, giving them access to that entire thing, and to say that there's a different world that you can have access to. And again, what we also do is we share our phone numbers. When you get out on bail, call us. We'll help you. And there was, another dear friend of mine who works at Tihar who said, Puneeta, have boundaries. Don't ever allow them to. I said, why? If I'm saying that as you and me, they have dignity and respect as a basic human right, what am I afraid of? And believe me, Sadhana, you give them respect, they give you back. I have no fear. Because they really love you, So, I mean, and I understand and I acknowledge the power of arts, but I would actually want as much practitioners, to come, volunteer, connect, and actually change the public perception that these are not monsters. It could be your child there, but you have the money to pay the police, to get the lawyers, which these kids don't have.
I think briefly in time of history in Venezuela, there was this beautiful program, El Sistema,
Yes, you told me about
which worked, and well, you had crime rate going down with the street children singing. Absolutely. And Christopher Dudamel hit the ranks of a musician in California. So yeah,
And there's a shift in consciousness.
And there's a shift in consciousness. Yes, Vikram?
Just a point. Sorry, go ahead, Janaka.
No, I just want to add to the El Sistema one. So the El Sistema program, the British Council supports El Sistema in Scotland and Venezuela. And during the 75th year of independence, we had a collaboration. So A.R. Rahman was the big brand ambassador for the season of culture. And we had El Sistema Scotland, young kids, young street kids, and people who, children who who didn't have the means for any kind of music education, but had learnt music because they were part of El Sistema, collaborated with very young children in Nagaland, which is part of Rahman's conservatory, and the Sunshine Orchestra in Chennai, and they performed a 2-hour concert in Chennai, and they played Tamil songs.
Oh,
the Scottish band played Tamil songs, and the children in Chennai played one of their Scottish folk songs, etc. But when you say El Sistema, it has absolutely transformative power, and even now they are in touch, and they are hopefully, the Chennai girls and boys can actually go to Scotland.
So I wrote, the musical scores, I mean, you all should just research on El Sistema. The reason why it came to Carnatic music is because Carnatic music has this 72 Melakarta chakra system, right? Every note pattern can be brought to that. So the scores, violin is not an instrument of Indian origin, but today you cannot have a concert in Carnatic music without a violin, and you just forget it was never supposed to be there.
I just had one quick point based on what Puneeta said. In any systemic intervention, if you're working with the kids, it's with children, and arts education is your intention, and it can be any kind of school. I think it's critical that you're working one node above that as well. So whether it's the caregiver in their schools, whether it's the regular teacher in our schools, they have to be going through the same program, enjoying it as much as kids. Otherwise, that environment never builds.
So let's go back to a little story of hope that Shilpa told us. Shilpa, you mentioned that educators are coming back to MAP. So has there been a sort of a community a community, which is what MAP's idea was. It was not supposed to be just a museum, it was supposed to be a community. and with a terrific impact on outreach. So what has been that circle back? Have the educators come back? Have there been learnings? Have you incorporated that? Has there been some kind of a biofeedback?
Yeah, absolutely. So completely agree with what Vikram was saying, that if you're looking to transform the ecosystem, you need all stakeholders of that ecosystem to buy into that change. So I think for us, part of that journey has been working directly with educators themselves as well. So as them participating in students' programs, yes, but also kind of directly engaging with them. So a little bit of a parallel thing to say that one of the programs that we've been running more recently at MAP has been around the space of the expressive arts. So we have a program currently that is looking at well-being through using artworks in the collection. And part of the process to building that program itself was essentially looking at a program for children, younger children, one for adolescents, and one for the educators. And the one for the educators is also trying to tackle two aspects of it. One being that they in themselves, how they think of well-being, and then how that can translate into their classrooms, into their schools, and them becoming champions. The idea being very much that if you don't recognize that for yourself, it's very hard to actually imagine that for someone else, yeah, and make it happen for someone else. So I think very much that's something that we kind of have a growing focus on. And thinking in terms of learnings, I think that's a constant kind of journey. I think much like inclusion, learning is just a lifelong sort of process. And with educators, for example, early learnings were always that we were, even from schools that were engaging with us repeatedly, they often sent us art teachers. And I think one of the first things we hit as far as challenges went was that art teachers had expectations of an art workshop. And their expectations were you had to learn how to make sculpture or you learned how to draw better. And we were not doing that. So we actually ended up with a lot of teachers being upset in a way. And so we had to keep broadening that scope to engage educators who were not necessarily art teachers, or work with art teachers to kind of reimagine what arts education could look like, not focusing on just the skills of it. So not just about building technical knowledge, but thinking about what the arts could do beyond that for you and how you imagined yourself, your place in the world. And therefore, one of the strands of, I think, the learning that we started picking up on was to very specifically even design engagements that uses the arts as a pedagogical tool for educators. So we just recently did one that's actually around the visual arts and literacy, very specifically looking at earlier kind of teachers who have very specific learning outcomes when it comes to reading, writing, speaking, and sort of looking at how the arts and engaging with it can expand how they approach it for themselves in classrooms. And ultimately, I guess the goal is then thinking about classrooms as being exciting spaces where play is part of how you teach, in as much as it's how you learn. And teaching in the end, I think, is kind of a learning process itself. You learn as much from the young people and the students as they learn from you.
How are we doing on time, Sandhya? We have how much time? 20 minutes. Should I open it to the Q&A and then come back for closing comments? Yeah.
I just want to say one of the nicest things about MAP is when you go there and
Just
as
use
an
the...
ordinary person you can
Ma'am, you can use the mic.
One of the nicest things about MAP is when you go there and as an ordinary person you light a lamp. I know, otherwise there's always VIPs are lighting a lamp. One of the loveliest experiences I have. I just wanted to say that.
Power of technology. Shilpa, take a bow. Yeah, actually, we did a festival together at MAP, and that's so true because everybody who came for the festival did a little lamp. Yeah, there's...
Thank you for this great panel. My thought was about, from having visited MAP and having come to BIC many times, a lot of the experiences that are curated focus on reflective observation when people are, sensing something, so they're getting a context to it through the concept and the idea and the introduction to it. They're getting some amount of concrete experience of the event, but there's very little space for active experimentation and learning by doing. And one of the things in Steiner education and it, new age education is really to bring that into the body memory, the cell memory, and to, in the immediacy of the moment, engage with doing something with your hands or creating. And I know I've seen that in some symposia at BIC. We have pieces of paper where people can write or draw their opinions, or when you had the see, feel, touch here at MAP a few months back. But can we build that into maybe experiences that we're curating where if there's a space for people to draw, paint, work with clay, and especially for children, it gets into their cell memory and their body memory. And if we can create that space for them to take home whatever they've created, because otherwise we'll end up with too much stuff. And
Which one of you would like to take that?
so
It's a comment.
is learning by doing something we can use to close the loop? Because I see that in museums abroad they had this room where you have, scissors and glue and...
Yeah, she'll answer that.
Okay,
Yeah,
so at MAP, for example, I think experience in terms of the ways in which, as you were saying, so one of the things I think about engaging with art in general is that it can be very much a multimodal way of thinking about it, especially in museums. And I think at MAP we are quite conscious about that in terms of how we'd like to weave it into your experience at the museum. So in terms of, even though, for example, there may not be a making component in every exhibition that you're visiting, there are elements of interactivity, whether that's in the sort of audio-visual material that may be possible, there is publicational material that is there, there are tactile corners so you can feel certain elements that are, part of that narrative. There are also technological interventions sometimes, allowing you to respond in some fashion. I think in terms of having a general makers lab, this is for us, I think, just a space thing. We are a small compact museum in the center, but we do run engagements that allow for that. So exactly what you're saying, essentially, every last Sunday at MAP, we host a Make It MAP. It's open, it's drop-in, kids, families, everyone is invited. All they do is actually get inspired by a work from the collection. They make something as a response, and they get to take it back with them. So that's how we...
I think you've answered it.
I think she's... Yeah, there's a question behind.
Yeah, thank you very much. I have a question on the creative economy. So I see two barriers there and would like to get your reflection on this. So one is, you talked about sensitivity that we have about art. So if you are like an artist, means you see Bangalore is kind of intellect capital of the country, right? So you have all the MBAs, all the engineers, they are coming and working here. But their view about art, it's only a thing where you are doing a hobby or these kind of things. So they will never think beyond that. So that is one part. Second is when we talk about, I would say, the entrepreneurs, the art entrepreneurship. So there is a good support for the artisans. There is a good support for individual artists, but we don't have any examples of art entrepreneurship. So how do we showcase that? How do we build emphasis into this kind of a field? Any thoughts? So these are the two things which I just would like your reflections.
I have a quick response to the second
Yeah.
one, from our work. So, on art entrepreneurship, it's a great question, and I think it's a question that's been asked several times because, and Arundhati Nag alluded to that in her presentation, where she said that, for example, don't ask an artist to write a proposal. We don't know how. So just for this reason, I think a few years ago, we started. No. I was getting distracted by you. So just a few years ago, we started something called the Festivals Academy. And during COVID, we had to sort of abandon it. It would have been in Kerala, but we persisted. And this university is called Edinburgh Napier University. It's in Edinburgh, and they've collaborated with us to create a complete toolkit and a manual for any festival manager who wants to sort of, right from like fundraising to how to make your festival visible, how to create your, it's like an entrepreneurship toolkit, right? So it gives you that. So that it's called, and I think, do we have a SAFCA fellow here? Yeah, we have a living example of a SAFCA fellow, South Asia Festivals and Cultural Academy. So you should probably talk to Vikram. Vikram, you want to wave? Yeah. You should probably catch up with Vikram to see how useful it was. So there are programs like this. But as I say it, I also understand that India is such a large country and the fellowships that we offer may not be adequate, but it is a starting point, and we've had about 10 or 12 fellows go now. It's a fully funded program, so if someone has a really good entrepreneurship proposal, wants to understand this more, then we also run cohorts within India. So I think there was a Bangalore cohort once way back, and then there are cohorts in other parts of the country, I think Assam or Odisha, I forget now, but those are available for especially creative arts entrepreneurs. And we have the creative economy fellowships, which again went very well. Short-term fellowships, so you don't worry about being away from home or being away from your business. The other scholarship that we have is called the Charles Wallace India Trust Fellowship. It's specifically for the arts, and you don't have to worry. A lot of scholarships also have an age limit, but the Charles Wallace one is a little generous. So even if you're a sort of mid-career practicing professional in the arts, you can apply, and it's a short-term fellowship which does wonders for your arts and artistic career.
Okay, I think there's a question. There are 3 questions. Okay, so go ahead here.
Hi, my question is around the challenge that I see on ground when if I'm a student in a school, in a regular school in this country. Art is exactly the same that my grandfather has learned, right? So there's nothing that's changed. I walk into a class, I'm taught how to draw. In some schools, it's about some form of a skill that's being taught. I've been a part of the NCRT for several years as an advisor, and let me assure you that the publishers in this country impact education far more than any policymakers or any amazing thinkers like you. So my question to you is, why don't you engage with the industry of education? And in this case specifically, these would be the publishers that actually publish these books, right? The trainers that are training these teachers. And Vikram, you said that beautifully. I think Delhi is a fantastic example. I would really love to see how far that goes as an example. But we have about 1.5 million schools. Even if you take the private schools, we are more than 500,000. That's a large number. And somehow a lot of these conversations that I see are great islands of excellence and somehow not reaching that average child that is still struggling to enjoy art, to be a part of the idea. Okay, my name is Sultan. I'm the chairperson for the Association of International Schools, and I also make films for kids and do multiple events for children. So that's what I do. And I advise the government of India.
I could take the... I thought I'd just speak about why the art is the same as his grandfather's. That's the point.
You should probably do that.
Yeah. Go ahead with the government school and then
in terms of, because we work largely with government systems, so in terms of government schools, I think the 2 or 3 programs that have been, at least what we think have created a dent, is we worked with the Premier League, which is the English Premier League. So they are our sort of, main knowledge partner, and we worked in about 7 or 8 states in India. I know it's not much, but 7 or 8 states. And this was about using football to look at, classroom practices and also create these football clubs. In Kerala, in a state like Kerala, it really worked very well because, they are natural, they're crazy about football more than cricket. So we did that. And then drawing from that, English Premier League has now created a sort of toolkit, again, for teachers, like you said very rightly, no point impacting children. So we seldom work with children directly. We work only through the school and through the system because we believe that will create a system and systemic change. So this one was trialed in Delhi, and then went to Odisha and West Bengal, I think, is doing pretty well. So it works with physical education teachers, because most often the sports period, I remember when I was studying in school, the math teacher would come and say, okay, today there's no sports, I'm going to teach extra lessons in math, you know, whatever. So the Premier League Primary Stars program, I think, worked really well, and also looks at arts and 21st century skills through the medium of sports. So we're trying to do these small little things, but understand where you're coming from. So I don't have a response for the larger question.
No, the larger question, I'll just give you a very quick response. You know, we were a part of a national curriculum by the government to run arts education. As a society, we are a part of this problem, because the first thing you would do is to recruit a teacher. I don't know if you're aware how difficult in a country like India to get an arts teacher, and by arts teacher, I mean across the spectrum, music, dance, visual arts. What happens is when somebody goes to Kalakshetra or when somebody goes to MS University Baroda, it is for a professional aspiration. Now, if Oliver Sacks' data is out there. It takes those 10,000 days. It takes those 20, and that's true for a lawyer. That's true for somebody. You may look at somebody who's doing mediation and earning X, but actually when that person starts, gets a stipend of 12 to 15. So it's not only the arts. That's the limited point I'm making. To the fact that actually arts curriculum has not changed in our country. It has not changed. The needle is moving, but I'm optimistic, or I'm compulsively optimistic. So I'm going to say that there have been, the needle has moved. You know, NCRT and CBSE, we can all, a certain economic strata can go to IB. The demographics of the country make you go to a certain school. So the mountain that has been climbed is in summative and formative assessments. We had one exam at the end of the year. So somewhere those servo, so it's a small drop of work that has been done. Impossible to get, nobody studies arts to be a teacher. You take arts when you have failed, because the first top 10 singers, the drop from the 10th to the 11th is so great, that's when they start looking to teaching. And when they come to be teachers, they do not, there is no beard to teach them child psychology, report writing, assessments. So the entire pedagogy of teaching has to change for them. That is the fundamental challenge 40 years back. Unless we revamp journalists, teachers, salary, we'll have these problems. Do we have time to take one more question? We have two people, two. So we'll club that. Oh, we have three. Can we do a cheat code? We are the last panel. Yeah.
Okay, I just want to say that.
Yeah, Sri, come.
Yeah, we still seem to look at arts as separate from human beings, no? The rest of everything. And I think that is the crux of the problem.
Change. Sure.
It's an add-on. It's like sports. I think I heard someone say sports instead of, I think it was Janaka who said that. Then you had something called SUPW. I don't know if NCRT
Socially useful, productive work.
Some useful periods wasted.
SUPW.
So, in that, wasted. Free period. Free, okay. No, but I'm just trying to tell you.
Okay.
Sadhana, your point regarding the status of the arts teacher, the music teacher in the school. That's the other aspect. What is the value that teacher brings to the school? And why do we look at it as something outside? It's intrinsic in you as a person. Some level,
sure.
Something. I mean, I may try to start drawing a horse, it may end up looking like a monkey. That's the other point. But the thing is, how do we instill that, and we don't? And I think here, I'm glad somebody said what's in the mainstream, what's in the private school. I have to share this with you. I had a neighbor who was a principal of a private school in Bangalore. And she was telling me that there was a company that had approached her saying, we will change the calendar, or we will bring you digitally different paintings every month. So each classroom will have a painting. And of course the school would have to pay for it and everything else. So I said, why don't you just ask the children to paint and use the same thing? it hadn't occurred to her that there you have children who have the talent or who don't have the talent, but you could still do it rather than get this multinational company come in and show whatever Monet painting or, Renoir or things like that. You don't need that. So I'm trying to tell you that on the one hand, we're talking about Deshi and, reviving our arts and our crafts. And the other, you have the pressure from other sources. What is it? What did you call it? Some economy. What did you call it? Yeah, creative economy. So there's creative economy in reverse.
Thank you, Sri. Thank you. Yeah, I think there's one question here. One question. We'll just club both the questions. Sorry, we just run out. Yeah.
And I have to thank Sudhina for her, Miss Boy, for your wonderful presentation. Thank you. That's the heart. Thank you.
And that says a lot. Sri is ex-UNICEF. Yeah, quick, we'll club both the questions and then we'll wrap up.
Hi, I'm Prashant. I'm a software engineer, software entrepreneur. I was very bad at drawing, so I gave up. Very late in my life, while I was going through therapy for ADHD, I was recommended and I discovered Jackson Pollock and Rothko, and I thought I was doing similar stuff. Why they didn't let me do. I went to an art teacher and I asked, dude, I want to learn something. He said, look, nobody can educate you about art. They can teach you craft, the skill. Because education is mostly about templatization, industrialization, a conveyor belt. And here we are talking about teaching like art, which is imply a hierarchy, which imply a template. Shouldn't we focus more on teaching craft and the skill and make it more acceptable? Like, art education should be like English education, which can be used in physics, chemistry, and other, like what ma'am was saying exactly the same point.
Thank you. Can I shift the mic to him and then we close? May I, you respond to him? Yeah.
Let's take the last question.
I'll keep it short. This is to Puneeta. I couldn't help miss that you kept referring to boys when you said children in conflict homes, right? I'm wondering what's the percentage between men and women there? I'm also wondering, is there a connection to art education? Because in this society as a whole, you look at arts being a woman's domain, and it should be made mandatory arts education for men because it's so strongly tied to emotional intelligence. I think that was
Okay, so Vikram takes his...
Just very quick response to, I think she was more a comment, but
I think we're... No, you can.
but I want to respond to that gentleman's question.
Yeah.
That in connecting it to what Sultan just said, it can be scaffolded, it can be taught, it can be done as a more structured thing, which is fun for kids also. Think of how we've changed how math is taught, right? Like it's really, really now structured and fun. In many, let's not use the worst case as the marker. And so I think if I go back to the experience I just narrated, my teacher could make it in an under-resourced school. And to Sultan's point, like if we engage with the publishers, we have to think creatively about it. It can be done because it's just scaffolding. Children just learn that way. So it's about not using it as a tool of selection, but as a tool of teaching. Yeah. I think that's the most important.
Yeah, so to respond to you, yes, we work only with young boys because the ratio is that for every 100 boys, there would be 3 girls. And the boys I work with actually are in for murder, rape, sodomy, kidnapping, all of that. For the girls, it's generally crimes of passion, right? They're not criminals as such. And they're kept actually in a place called Nirmal Chaya, which is where the women are kept near Tihar. It's that within that complex. And mostly it's actually trafficked girls, maybe they're in for prostitution. So it's, more of that, crimes of prostitution, trafficking, etc. Murder would be out of revenge, and it's really, a crime of passion. So we've just decided to work with the most difficult population. And with the girls, there still is this hope that, they will be rehabilitated and they can come back. And I absolutely agree with you about the power of arts in actually being able to get a person connect with, the inner self in them and saying that, okay, I can make different choices in my life. Yes.
I must say, as a moderator, I must thank my panelists for their compassion, because I could read the room and I knew there were questions. So not one of them questioned me when I used my moderator's privilege to completely eschew round 3. So a big thank you to all 4 of you. And thank you to all of you all for your questions, for engaging. As I began the conference by saying, we have many more miles to go. And we hope our grandchildren have better art teachers.